People who left their churches. What was the final straw? When I was 17, I started attending a Christian megachurch at the suggestion of my crush, who I later found out often did special favors for the pastor. Anyway, I actually enjoyed attending this church until I began going to its church's youth group. At it, the pastor would encourage people to absorb the Holy Spirit, and after absorbing the Holy Spirit himself, eating the holy bread, he'd start speaking in tongues and rattling his body like he was having a seizure. He did this for a solid 2 or 3 minutes, and afterwards would come back and tell us all that he just spoke with God himself, and God allowed him to see the future. He couldn't tell us what he saw in the future though, as apparently he promised to God he'd keep it a secret. Whenever we took the holy bread, however, and failed to experience the divine, he'd blame it on random things. For my friend, it was the fact he wasn't raised religious. For my other friend, it was the fact he had an ungodly haircut, and my problem was that I was left-handed. By this point, I already saw this church as a bunch of baloney. But then one specific night at the youth group fully confirmed what I thought. We were sharing details about our families and personal lives. When the microphone covered with "Donate for Jesus" stickers came around to me, I hesitated for a moment. I wasn't sure if I wanted to expose myself and my family, but the pastor pressured me by saying God is speaking to him right now, and God will be very cross with me unless I unburden myself. I was emotionally vulnerable at that moment, and his words were enough to encourage me to share. I proceeded to tell the entire group the hardships my family went through when my older brother was diagnosed with bone cancer a few years prior. He was in remission at this time, but it was still a very sore subject, as seeing my brother in so much pain had seriously messed with my head. The room was quiet for a second after I finished speaking, and the pastor tutted, placing his hand on my shoulder and saying, "What a shame you and your family weren't members of the church back then. We would have laid hands on him and made his recovery quicker through God." I sat there in absolute shock, completely dumbfounded. The pastor then closed her eyes for a second and said, "The Lord just spoke to me again. He wants you to know he hurts that you think you need medication to be better. He is your medicine." I stood up and walked out of that church that very second, and as I was leaving, the pastor yelled at me that God is here and he will punish me for this act of treason. Right as I reached the door, I turned back to him yelling that he can go F himself, and that if God is indeed here, he'll forgive me for this.